Technically, I was supposed to talk about Bonds Beyond Time, if I remember correctly, but I'm just going to be talking about the Darkside of Dimensions, mostly in this one, while briefly touching on Bonds Beyond Time at the start of this. Bonds Beyond Time is a crossover between the original Yu-Gi-Oh! GX and the new, at the time, 5Ds. It was basically a special. It wasn't a movie. It was 60 minutes long. There was not enough time to set up a proper story. And the final duel of the movie, it basically had one turn for each of the three protagonists getting to pull off their favorite combos that you know and love in the series, in their respective series. For one, Yusei did his Stardust Dragon thing, Jaden did his Neos thing, and Yugi did his Dark Magician thing. So if you're knowledgeable about that, at least scantily, then you know what to expect in that. And they, of course, do win. And it seems to mostly focus on Yusei. Yuki's just there to sell tickets. Jaden's pretty interesting because it's post season 4, a season that we never actually got dubbed in the West. And honestly, if I'm going to go through GX, like I mentioned in the previous video, I'm going to be watching the Japanese dub version of GX because it has season 4. And I hear that one's actually pretty good. And I also did some more research into the dark side of dimensions and the characters of Kaiba and all the other characters and how they differentiate between the Japanese version, the manga, and the 4Kids versions. Because when I made that joke of Kaiba would never have made a friggin' duelist academy to train people to be better than him, I was mainly talking about the 4Kids Kaiba that's basically a meme at this point. The 4Kids Kaiba would never let anybody learn how to play duel monsters to be better than him. He would not allow it. His ego would be too challenged, and maybe his ego would be so high that he would think that nobody who goes to Duelist Academy would ever be better than him. And then, you know what I would have loved to see? Instead of Jaden versus Yugi, I would love to see Jaden versus Seto Kaiba, so that Jaden can be the first person to prove to Seto Kaiba that this was a very bad idea, that Duelist Academy has trained dozens of duelists to be better at the card game that he wants to be the king of, and so he will live to regret all of his decisions, and blah 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 blah. It was a fun idea. Now, what with Darkside of Dimensions, though, now that we're done with Bonds Beyond Time, the issue with Darkside of Dimensions is that this story cannot exist in the GX spectrum. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX takes place an unlisted amount of time after the original series, but both GX and 5Ds are said to be taking place in the same timeline. 5Ds is in the future, GX is just a little bit of time after the original series, but then we see this movie and we learn that this can't really happen. Kaiba throws the world into the future in just a few months, which doesn't really make sense to me. And the way that Kaiba has revolutionized the game, and then GX happens, and none of that happens because this concept didn't exist at the time, it creates retroactive issues. But like I've always said, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the only canon Yu-Gi-Oh! So GX, 5Ds, and all that other crap, it's not canon to the original Yu-Gi-Oh! You can view GX much like Dragon Ball GT. That's basically what it is. GT is not canon to the original storyline of the original Dragon Ball, much like GX isn't canon to the original storyline of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! It's existing in the same space as his spin-off side story in an alternate timeline, maybe, but not exactly in the main canon, if you will. And I mentioned in a previous video how this timeline also doesn't really make sense. The timeline of events and how all this stuff happens, it just doesn't make sense to me, personally. How could Kaiba create all that he has created in the span of, at the very most, 6 months? According to this movie's timeline, a couple of months have passed since the very end of the Yugioh anime. And in that time, he has not only created a Matrix-like world, he has created like a link system. This movie was also part trying to sell the Duel Links game that was coming out around the same time. But Kaiba came up with the Duel Link system, and all these cards exist in a database, and not actually real cards. He's playing with hologram cards. And he also built an elevator that goes from his headquarters all the way to a space station in the sky. He has all of this cool crap that he has built in just the span of a few months. It just doesn't make sense. I am willing to give him at least 2 years to make all of this stuff, because it's Seto Kaiba. Of course, he could probably figure that out in 2 years, but I wouldn't say he does this in the span of half a year. It just doesn't match up, and I know I'm trying to put time consistency into Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all things, and that as is kind of very difficult to do. But like I mentioned, the difference between the 4Kids Kaiba, the 4Kids Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, and the Japanese version of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the manga version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very different. This movie is using the Japanese canon of Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus the 4Kids canon. Even though a lot of the main 4Kids actors have come back, Dan Green's voicing Yugi, I keep forgetting his name. I know his name, I just can't remember it. I'm not going to take too much time trying to remember his name, but I know his name, I just can't recall it. I'm terrible with names like that. But he also voices Brock in the Pokemon show. But I know who this guy is, I just can't remember his name. Anyways, they bring these guys back, they're voicing the characters, but this isn't taking over the 4Kids continuity of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! It is taking from the Japanese continuity, which means that Pegasus is dead, Bones and his cronies are probably dead, Yami Bakura has died, Good Bakura is alive, he's great, he's fine, but yeah, it's taking place in that continuity, and Kaiba is a much different character in that continuity versus the 4Kids continuity. 4Kids Kaiba is very interestingly written. In the first season, Kaiba does have a good character arc, and by the end of it, he might even start to become a better person, only to regress in character by the second season to become just the same jerkass as he always has been, just for the sake of the plot to go on. In the Japanese version, by season 2, Kaiba retains his character growth, but he also sees this ancient stone tablet and the king of games and all that stuff, and he wants that title. He wants to be the king of games. So he wants to get the god cards and face off against Yami to obtain the god cards and get the title of Dual King. And it's all pretty fun and good and all this stuff. And he also starts to believe in the ancient hoodoo voodoo stuff by the duel with the Shizu. That's also pretty interesting. What else is there? He is a full believer by season 5, and he gives Yugi his respect by the end of season 5. He even gives Joey respect during Season 2's semifinals. Kaiba gives Joey his respect, which he never gave Joey any respect in the 4Kids version, because that rivalry, that one-sided rivalry, has to have its comedic effects. But in the Japanese dub, a lot of people have great character growth, and Kaiba is one of those very interesting, multifaceted characters in that regards. And that is why the Darkside of Dimensions exists, is because of Kaiba. Everybody else, their characters have more or less been resolved, with maybe the possible exception of Bakura. We get to see a little bit more of his backstory and how he obtained the Millennium Ring, and how Shadi died, and all this other stuff that gets newly added. But the one character with unresolved issues is Kaiba. He feels like he should have been the one to duel Yami in that final duel, to the ritualistic duel, because he looked at that stone tablet and saw that it was he and the pharaoh that were destined to duel each other throughout the ages, and he said this was his destiny, to defeat Yami and send his spirit off so that he could take the title of duelist king, much like in the ancient realm, in the ancient world, how Yami defeated the Zark god, and Yami gave the title of pharaoh over to High Priest Seto. And that's usually how this ancient thing between them has always gone, is that Kaiba would inherit the title after Yami, the pharaoh, had passed on. But that didn't happen this time, because Yugi was here. So Yugi gets the title of Duel King. But Kaiba isn't interested in dueling Yugi. He still believes that the true duelist king is the pharaoh. And there is a manga counterpart to this. I believe it's like a prelude leading into this. I think Takahashi may have even been the one behind the drawing of it. I don't have any hard copy scans to show you, but you can always look this up on your own. There is a manga counterpart to this movie where Kaiba is testing his dueling system, and he puts his mind into the Matrix, and he finds the pharaoh. He becomes a believer, but his prototype system isn't good enough to truly get to the afterlife, to truly find Atem. And so he's pulled, the plug is pulled, and he's brought back out. But he is now a believer, and he believes that this can happen, that he can find Atem again, so that he can have his duel, his final rematch, to truly prove who is superior between the two. And I liked that. I really liked that lead up, and that for that character. How he's no longer about cheating in the game, how he used to be when he was the green-haired Kaiba from Season 0, which in the Japanese version is, the Season 0 is canon to the whole thing, because after all, Part 1 in the manga is the green-haired Kaiba era, so all of that is canon. So up next for Kaiba is to continue to develop his Duel Links system whilst investigating the Plana and Diva, because he did come across Diva's sister during the manga prelude to the Darkside of Dimensions storyline. So he knows about the Plana, he knows about Diva, he's been looking into all of this stuff. So that's why when you watch this movie and you see that Kaiba seems to be on top of everything, that's because he's actually been involved in all of this stuff before this film even began. So that's actually pretty interesting to me. I really like how he seems to be like 3 steps ahead of almost everybody. The only person he just can't beat is Yugi, and he realizes by the end of the film that the true king of games never really was Yami. It never really was the pharaoh. It was Yugi. because Yugi is the reincarnation of the Pharaoh. He is the reincarnation of those natural King of Games talents, and by the end of the original manga, Yugi has developed all of the skills and confidence and in his abilities to actually be better than the Pharaoh. So the person that Kaiba always needed to beat was never the Pharaoh, it was Yugi. However, Kaiba's history has always been with the Pharaoh, so even though he acknowledges that Yugi is the King of Games, he still wishes to go find the actual Pharaoh. Go to the Netherworld and find him to give him one final duel and all of that good stuff. So by the end of this movie, he obtains the artifact that Shadi gave to Diva, which is some sort of Millennium Cube type of thing for the Dimension System. And so Kaiba incorporates magic with science. Yes, as Yami once said to Kaiba, a man who has no past has no future. So Kaiba finally is accepting the past. He is accepting the mysticism and the magic of the past alongside his future tech stuff in order to finally get his wish. And that is one of the truest forms of character growth that this movie could ever show for this guy. Everybody else doesn't really need any character growth. Yugi's character was finished by his final duel with the Pharaoh. Joey probably has plenty of unresolved character issues, but like I said, GX could have just been a sequel series to Yugioh, as it technically is, but instead of being about Jaden, it should have been about Joey. It should have been about Joey continuing on his career of being a professional duelist, as he says in here that once he graduates high school, he wishes to continue on his journey to become a professional duelist. Duelist Academy could have just been a college, and Joey could have just enlisted in Duelist Academy to become a better duelist there on his road to being a professional and stuff. You know, it was all right there. It was all set up, right? It could have been about Joey, man. But they just keep shafting the character. They just keep shafting Joey to the side. But at least Kaiba gets to have this movie. He at least gets to have this story, because the Darkside of Dimensions is not Yugi's movie. It's not Diva's movie. Don't let any of that crap distract you. This is Kaiba's movie. This is Kaiba's story. The manga Prelude is all about Kaiba. It's from his perspective. It's all about him. So naturally, by the time you watch this movie after that manga Prelude, it's all about Kaiba being on top of everything. He's the one who sets everything in motion. He sets this whole film into motion. He's the one who develops the link system. He's the one who finds the Millennium Puzzle. He's the one who puts it together in like 6 hours when it took Yugi about 6 years. He's the one who reunites the puzzle with Yugi. He's the one who basically sets in motion Atem's return to this timeline so that Diva's powers can be taken away from him and all of the Plana crap can go away. Kaiba is the one who basically saves the whole story. From a certain point of view, it's all about him. And I liked that at the end of the movie, we get to see that Kaiba has successfully completed his dual link dimension system, goes to the past, and I do like that we don't actually see Kaiba duel Atem. We just get to see him going into the throne room and seeing Atem, and the final scene of the film is Atem smiling. And then cut to credits. That's awesome. That is perfect. That's a perfect ending. I didn't go over the full story of this, naturally, because I want you to watch this. If you haven't seen this yet, I want you to see this. This is the epilogue to the original anime of Yugioh that we didn't really get in the actual original anime of Yugioh. If you remember the final episode of the original Yugioh, you would remember how it just abruptly ends, and that's it. Well, this is the epilogue that we should have got 20 years ago. That's that epilogue. So, you owe it to yourself as an original Yu-Gi-Oh fan to give this film a look. You can watch Bondsme on Time if you want, but this is the film that you have to see, especially if you're a fan of the Kaiba character. And it seems that my Yu-Gi-Oh journey hasn't completely completed just about yet, because I still need to read the manga of Duelist and Millennium World. I read part of Millennium World, the first 2 novels. There's about like 6 or 7 total, and I still need to read the Duelist ones. I've read the entirety of Season 0 for the manga, so I at least know about that, because that was my way of getting Season 0. Because I couldn't actually watch Season 0, the actual anime. The manga was a lot more easily available to me to take a look through. So now I have to go through the manga of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I may come back and make a manga to anime comparison, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I have way too many Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos on here as is. But I may come back every now and then for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Return, because I just really enjoy this anime almost as much as I enjoyed Dragon Ball growing up. Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu Yu Hakusho, Pokemon, and what was that 5th one? Was it Kenshin or Gundam? Either one of the two. Gundam. I really liked G Gundam. I really liked Gundam Wing. And that's what sparked me into getting into the Universal Century Gundam with Amuro Way. And Kara Noble is very good. All of it is very, very good. So, those 5, the top 5 for me in the anime. Even though Pokemon is it's a 4 kids thing, and it's very, very, very dated. I would not watch most of the Pokemon anime anymore. I would probably watch the original first season, the first show, the first generation, and the Johto Journeys and the Johto League, and maybe even the Hoenn League. I'd probably watch those 3 and then stop, because that's when I stopped watching on cable. I came back for the Mewtwo Genesect movie, mainly because Mewtwo was in it, but it wasn't my Mewtwo. It was voiced by somebody else. It wasn't voiced by Dan frickin' Green, even though Dan Green was still there, clearly. This movie came out around the time of this movie. The Genesect movie came out around the time of this, and Dan Green was clearly still working with 4Kids voicing Yugi here, so you could have got Dan Green to voice Mewtwo again. But they just didn't do that for some reason. They just didn't do that. And I don't like that they're alluding that this might just be a different Mewtwo. There should only be one Mewtwo. There should only be one. Only one. One! But that's just me. I'm not going to go into Pokemon on a Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. I'm just going to end it here and say, watch Darkside of Dimensions. It is very good, but if you're confused watching this, I would recommend tracking down that manga prelude. I think it's 2 chapters. Go ahead and track that down, read that, then watch the movie. It'll make a lot more sense.